Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Mid-Tier Thoughts. First thing you might notice is we're in a little bit different location. Unfortunately, there was an accident with my garage, so it's currently being rebuilt. You can see that on the community post. I posted about that. My wife kind of hit some ice and unfortunately slid into my garage door. It's 12 degrees outside. I don't have a garage door, so I'm filming in my bedroom. But what are we talking about? So we're going to talk about today about how much money you should actually spend on a rifle to defend yourself with or to trust your life with, like life and liberty type stuff, right? And the reason why we're doing this is I was watching a lot of trench grenade stuff lately, which if you guys haven't, go check out Trench Grenade, his channel. It's really good. The guy's got a pretty decent background. So he spent some time in the airborne, spent some time in the mechanized infantry. I think he's a drill sergeant now, is active duty Army. He does have some really good points that he makes. I think some of his stuff is kind of skewed by his experience in the military when it comes to kind of the modern Minuteman lifestyle. I think he's sometimes looks at things and forgets that we're not supported by the logistical network that the military has. And that's where he gets some of his opinions from it. In my opinion, that's just my take on it. I think he's a good dude with a lot of good stuff and his heart's in the right place. I just think that it could be better, or maybe I just don't agree with all of his points. And so I'm going to be addressing one of them. So I'm going to have a link to the video up here. If you guys want to pause this, go check that out. That'd be awesome. But let's get into it, right? So what we're talking about, like how much money realistically you should spend on a rifle to defend your life with. And the factors that are coming in here are going to be, what's your budget, right? I always like to tell people I can find you a decent rifle in any budget for the most part, as long as it's reasonable. What are you preparing for? What do you consider to be the threats you're going to face? How likely are those threats that you're going to face going to happen? And how likely are you to actually use this rifle in a defensive scenario? When it comes to this, we're talking about the realm of Minutemen, lifestyle, SHTF, without rule of law, whatever you want to call it, right? Basically, whatever kind of rifle you're using for personal safety. Speaking of personal safety, when it comes to personal safety online, it's on us to protect ourselves. That's why I use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura keeps you safe online by doing all the hard work for you. They identify data brokers who are selling your information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Well, you could, in theory, opt out of these data brokers yourself. Every one of them has a different policy and way of operating, which is why Aura is so nice, since they step in and handle all of that for you behind the scenes. No headache, no problems. Give Aura a few weeks and you'll stop seeing your information on the sites when you search yourself, which will lead to way less spam. I know my Gmail folder is way smaller now that I've started using Aura. Aura will also continuously monitor the dark web and alert you if they find any personal information exposed. Anytime you sign up for a newsletter or website and that stuff gets leaked, they're there to step in and help you out. They're going to let you know fast if anyone tries to use that information to access your credit or bank accounts. Plus, they give you up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen. The Aura app also has a VPN with over 100 virtual locations. Does your VPN do that? You can go to the link in the description or type aura.com/midtierthoughts to try 14 days for free. That'll be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed and let you know. Stop leaving yourself vulnerable to data breaches and brokers. Go to my sponsor, aura.com/midtierthoughts, get a 14-day free day trial, and see if any of your data has been exposed. Link in description. See below. Okay, so he likes to say, so Trench Grenade in the video says something along the lines of, basically if you got a PSA or these super cheap Smith & Wessons, Rugers, things like this, like don't waste your time, don't waste your money, go out and just buy super solid General Defense, BCM, Sons of Liberty Gun Works, things like this, right? And I think from his perspective that it makes a lot of sense what he's saying, because his channel's geared a lot towards things of like, hey, when the balloon pops, things go south, whatever it is, there's be a lot of constant fighting, like firefights everywhere, blah, blah, blah. Right. Well, if you're envisioning a scenario where you're constantly engaging the enemy, if you're constantly getting in firefights and you're basically like a combat infantryman 24/7, then yes, right. I understand the mentality of having a super solid, rugged, reliable rifle. The odds of you being able to, go out in this oh crap scenario and pick apart things and fix your guns and things like this probably not as high. You're active all the time. Things are going crazy. You want a super rugged, reliable rifle. I totally understand that mindset. I think that's where he's coming from with this. So with that, he kind of trashes Palmetto and a few other companies and is like, hey, their stuff's not any good. It's not as high quality. So I thought let's look over some of my rifles that I have and my philosophy on them, because I do have some Palmettos. I do have some higher end stuff as well, and kind of compare and contrast what I have with his philosophy and kind of my outlook on this, right? So if we're going to be taking his approach and say that you have to have the high end stuff, I will say I am a big proponent of everyone having one super solid, rugged, reliable rifle. Now, what you define as rugged and reliable is going to vary depending upon who you are and what your budget is. I have, for example, my Daniel Defense. Let me unbury it from my guns here. So this is my Daniel Defense DD M4 V7. So with this guy here, I've got a Geisley, I think it's the SSAE trigger in here. I can never remember their proper names. So Geisley trigger in here. I have a Yankee Hill Machining, a Turbo K up front, Magpul bipod. This is the Surefire M600 Scout Light. This is a Vortex Viper PST 1-6. And then I've got a SIG Romeo 5 sitting up on top. So this is kind of my go-to. I can only grab one, and it's going to do everything kind of rifle, right? I've also got Magpul backups on here. So this is my deal. This is my kind of like things have gone south. I need to grab one gun and go. If I had to grab one reliable rifle, this is it. So why did I do that? Well, my philosophy at the time was it's better to have one super solid rifle than to have a bunch of mediocre rifles because I can only fight with one at a time. Now that rifle itself, the rifle started around, I think it was like 1850, something like that. And then having all the stuff on it, there's probably close to $3,000 worth of stuff onto that rifle. So not counting tax stamps, things like that. So if that's the case, right, then we do have one super solid, reliable rifle to where if I thought that my doomsday scenario was going to be constant firefights and engagements and, you know, I'm Jason Bourne, I'm out here like being Rambo, getting into firefights all the time, that's going to be what I'm going to grab. However, that being said, I don't think that that's a realistic way to look at things. I think we have plenty of precedent. We can look at Hurricane Helene. We can look at the wildfires in California. We can look at all kinds of different scenarios around the world where, you know, this idea that everything's going to go Mad Max, never be rebuilt, no civilization's ever coming back, and we're just constantly like, you know, rampaging against each other like marauders is not incredibly realistic. History has shown time and time again throughout the thousands of years of human history, no matter the calamity, no matter the society that collapses, civilization comes back fairly quickly. Now, what you define as quick is going to be, you know, up to interpretation. But yes, there's usually like, you know, some violence in the beginning, but things kind of start to settle down, societies start to form, things kind of rebuild themselves over time. So that's kind of the approach that I'm looking at is the most realistic. On top of that, if your scenario, if you're not in a major city, like I'm in a small town in in northern Idaho, the likelihood of me engaging in firefights on a daily basis are probably not that high, especially into the hundreds or thousands of rounds counts. So one argument that Trench Grenade made was that, you know, you need a rifle like the one I just showed because of its, you know, ability to go 10, 15,000 rounds, you know, with on its parts where, you know, longevity, super high quality control. And I understand that argument. However, I think your average person is probably going to be just as well served with a Palmetto AR or a Ruger, Smith, Saint, Springfield Saint, something like that, Romeo 5, and a Streamlight light on it. So kind of an example of that I have here. This is an old Palmetto lower. I think I have an aftermarket handguard on here. I can't remember who made it, to be honest. It's been a long time. I have a Romeo 5. This is a Streamlight handheld flashlight on here. And this is the Resonator R2. I use on my 300 Blackout, but I usually run the Turbo K on here. I just wanted to show the suppressor on here. So I'll usually switch the Turbo K back and forth between my other suppressor. So Magpul handguard, a little angled handguard, nice little sling, red anodized safety lever to remind me of where I came from. We've all had that day where red anodized was cool, and we've all learned that that's not the case. Same thing with Punisher schools. Don't do that. So, well, or do. I'm not your dad. So kind of looking at it like a cheaper rifle like that, right? That rifle I think I built all together brand new years ago, including the accessories, minus the suppressor, for I think like, I don't know, $600 altogether. And I've had that for probably 8 or 9 years now. I shoot it very frequently. One of the main upgrades I've done to it is put in a bootleg bolt carrier group, so I can turn the gas on and off whenever I'm shooting suppressed. So that's been kind of cool. Outside of that, I think I took the trigger out of the Daniel and put it into there once I replaced the trigger of the Daniel. So I've done a few things to it, but not a whole lot. So let's look at the case of like why I'm defending like the Palmetto or the cheaper rifles, right? Why am I not saying like, no, you have to go out and buy this $1,800 rifle? Look, if your mindset is that like things are going to go south, stay south, that they're never going to get better, and it's going to be Mad Max, go out and buy that $2,000 rifle. Go out and buy that super expensive rifle. Get it set up the way you want it, absolute perfection. I don't think that's like the most realistic case, right? So let's say whether it's that cheaper rifle that I just showed you, or even something more plain. So this one is a Bear Creek Arsenal. This is a 20-inch upper from theirs. Their N16A2 or N16A4 platform. So they sent me this a while back. So this is part of one of three that they sent me to review. I'm doing a year-long review on them. Everyone talks crap on BCA. I'm definitely still on that boat until they prove me wrong. I will say I've had hit or miss. I know buddies of mine who have them that have not had great experiences. That's not necessarily been my experience, but I'm documenting all of this so that way we can see it. I haven't had any issues with the 20 inchers. With the 16-inch one that they sent me, I have had a few issues, so we'll address that in a different video. So there is a way of going too cheap in that. I will say that. So I would say that if you are on that cheaper end, look to stick towards PSA and above. But something like those two last rifles, I think are going to hold your average person over pretty well. Because if you're super serious in this world of the Minuteman lifestyle kind of thing, I understand the argument being made for the higher reliability rifles. I do think that is a good thing. I am not denying that. And I think everyone should have a super rugged, reliable rifle. But I don't think that everyone necessarily that owns a rifle has to have a Daniel Defense. I think your average person, again, is going to be served just fine with that cheaper end rifle, because even if it is an oh crap scenario, the end of the world is coming, whatever it is, the likelihood that you're going to be getting engaged in massive amounts of firefights, like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Or you're shooting thousands of rounds to defend yourself. Like what scenario do you envision this happening in? Even in something as bad as like Katrina, right? Were there instances of self-defense? Absolutely, there were community watches, things like this. But were there like Fallujah level firefights? No. I mean, unless like the Chinese are falling from the sky and you have to go out into the woods, leave your family behind, and turn into Rambo, the odds of something like that, of you necessarily needing that capability, not insanely high. So your average person, I think, will be totally fine with the PSA. The PSA, I think we've seen plenty of videos, like Grantham's put some out, where you can look up any burn down video where you can see on full auto, these things make it about 1,000 rounds before they pop, which is about average across the board for just about any company. And these usually has to do with the overheating of the gas system or the gas block exploding, things like that. But whenever they do like these longevity tests, they usually go about 4,000 or 5,000 rounds before they start having major issues. And this is without cleaning. This is without maintenance. This is just running and gunning. I think your average person that's buying a Palmetto a Palmetto, even like a SIG M400 tread, anything like that, like an entry level rifle, like an under $1,000 rifle, you probably don't necessarily have the budget to shoot 5,000 rounds in a relatively short amount of time. Like if you went out and bought that rifle and then you coincided that with a purchase of 5,000 rounds, 5,000 rounds is probably going to last you quite a bit. Your average person is probably shooting 200 rounds a range session. They're going to the range once a month, maybe, because we have life and kids and everything else in there. Should you train more than that? It depends, like for me, I have a 22 caliber conversion, the CMMG conversions. I'll throw those in my ARs and go shoot 22 to get range practice whenever I'm trying to save money on ammo. It gets me a lot more trigger time, and it's cheap. You should train as much as possible, but not every training has to be dumping mags. And I get that, right? If you have the budget for it, great. If you don't feel bad about that, right? Work with what you got. So I think your average person, if they're constrained by budget to buy one of those lower end rifles at $100 optic, like the entry level like Romeo MSRs, or even like a Romeo 5 nowadays, or Holosun, something like that, you probably don't have the budget to just dump mags, and that's fine. I think that you're going to be well served with that. Most people are not looking at this rifle as like, I have to grab this when the Chinese come. It's more like, hey, when someone busts in the door, I'm grabbing my AR-15 and I'm defending my household. I'm probably not even getting through a full mag, right? So I think if that's your mentality, you're totally well served with a Palmetto, a SIG, or a Ruger, Smith & Wesson, anything like that. If you do lean more towards the more militant side, I guess, or the more doomsday type of scenario, then yeah, go with something more exotic. Go with something more reliable, something a little bit higher end. That's just my kind of sense on this, was that I think making blanket statements of saying like, no, if you have this, if you're poor, you're going to die kind of thing, it doesn't meet reality, right? Prime example, when I worked at the gun shop, the Glock 19 preferred handgun, in my opinion, to sell out all day long. It's around $500, five and a half, between 5 and 6, depending on what kind of models, making all that kind of stuff you get, right? Your average person that would come in here has a budget around $300 to $500. We would try to push them to the Glock 19 or something similar in that category, but the number one gun we sold, Taurus G2C. It's ugly. It's got a terrible trigger, but it works. I'll tell you that. It worked. I won't deny that. Or even our range gun, our range session, we had rental guns that you could come out and shoot on the range. It kept chugging right along with the rest of them. It was ugly. It didn't have all the bells and whistles. It didn't have any of the benefits, in my opinion, that any of the other guns had, but people liked it before the price point, and it worked. And same thing, I think, applies to some of these lower end rifles. And I don't mean lower end disrespectfully in any way, but just lower end on price. These entry level rifles, a lot of people crap on them, but it's like your average person's totally well served with that. And I think that Trench Grenade, his heart's in the right place, but he's got a very like military mindset. Again, he's been spent 12 years in the military. He's active right now. And I think a lot of times when we have these conversations about what kind of rifle do you need, things like this, people forget that this is entirely situational based and entirely scenario based on your personal life and what you view as your personal threats, personal concerns, personal issues that you may be facing as far as like your scenario you're prepping for. Are you prepping for a bump in the night? In which case, even something like this. Now, this is my Colt Sporter, but kind of pulled this out because like the PSA Freedom kits look very similar, right? So take off the optic, maybe add keep the light in a sling. Something like this sitting next to someone's bedside, totally fine, even with iron sights as a home defense weapon. Now, would I put a red dot on it? Sure, right? But totally usable as a perfect home defense weapon for the guy who just wants to have a gun to defend himself and his family and bump the night. Even if like it was like a partial collapse of society type of thing, Great Depression, something like that, right? Outside of like complete government collapse, total loss of control, or absolute like things have gone completely south and there is never going to again be a United States or any form of government, I think you're totally served with something like this. So if you're an average person, right, even if you're more like me, or you're more Minuteman minded, kind of defend the homestead, rally up the boys, defend the town kind of thing, gather the posse, so to speak, you should be pretty well served with this. Now, do I think that you should get the best rifle for the job? Yes, but you should get the best rifle you can afford. Don't put yourself into financial hardship because some dude on the internet told you that your rifle is not good enough. Go out and train with that rifle. Figure out what its faults are. Are there pieces that maybe you just need to upgrade your trigger? Maybe you need, to upgrade certain things on there. Maybe you need a new bolt, things like that, right? So understanding like the capabilities of your rifle and what to expect out of that. I think again, a 4,000 to 5,000 round service life for an $800 rifle is probably pretty on par, and your average person is probably going to take a long time to get to there. So even if we're more Minuteman minded, we're training all the time, we're going out, we're putting in the work, we've got a squad of boys, we're hitting the woods every day, we're doing patrols, we're setting up patrol bases, we're trained in medical, all of this stuff. Even if you have all of that, if you are realistically getting into scenarios where where a longevity of your rifle being 4,000 to 5,000 rounds is being brought into question because of how often you're engaging in firefights, the likelihood of you living is not high. Plain and simple, right? If there's no higher tier medical care, if there is no antibiotics, if it is this doomsday scenario that we are preparing for with a complete and total collapse of society, the odds of you living through a scenario in which you're engaging with the enemy so frequently that a 5,000 round longevity of your rifle is not good enough, you are probably going to die. Do I think you should give yourself every possible advantage to not die? Absolutely. So the reality of it is basically, regardless of which one of these rifles you choose and regardless of where your mindset goes with this, just keep realism in mind. Go out, train with your rifle, figure out where it fails and what things are good or bad about that weapon. There's a price difference for a reason. Higher quality control, higher tier components, better longevity, and better operation overall in harsher conditions is what you get with a higher tier rifle. So don't think I'm not telling you either to not buy a high-end rifle. But we all make compromises when we make a purchase, right? And your average person is usually making that compromise of the likelihood of danger, right? Versus your average person is making that compromise to maybe take an okay rifle, not great, but okay, good enough, right? Just as good, good enough, because the likelihood of them having to get into a scenario where the quality difference between that $800 rifle and that $1,500 rifle, the likelihood that they're going to get into a scenario where that becomes life or death is probably not that high. That's where I think your average person's mentality is at, right? Now, again, if you're a person that you were like, I want the best, solid, rugged, reliable rifle because my life is on the line and I want to defend my life and liberty with the best possible equipment I can get my hands on, absolutely go do it. But again, if you're an average dude looking out there to get an AR-15 just to defend your household, even if things go south, like you see the world going kind of crazy and you're like, I got food, I got water, I just want to be able to defend my stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting an entry level rifle and running it with $100, $200 optic, slapping on a stream light, calling it a day. So enough of my rant, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully next time I'll be in my garage again with a new studio. With all that being said, go follow Trench Grenade. He puts out some good stuff. He brings up some controversial points. Sometimes I'm not 100% sure if he's just trolling to troll or if he actually believes some of the stuff he puts out. But he makes some really interesting points and some thought-provoking stuff. So go check him out. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with all of his points, but I think he does make some really solid stuff in other areas. So go check him out on there. I should have a link to his channel down below and another link again to the video up here so you can kind of see what I was talking about. With that, if you have any questions or anything, put it down in the comments and put down in the comments what you think the average ideal price range you should spend on a rifle to defend yourself should be, and justify that with the scenario that you're buying the rifle for. So I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. With that, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you on the next one.